In 1982, on a quiet dealership lot somewhere in Middle America, a brand new sports car sat under fluorescent lights. It had pop-up headlights, sharp lines, mid-engine proportions. It looked fast, even standing still. The kind of car that made teenagers press their faces against showroom glass. The kind of car that promised something. And when the salesman turned the key, it sounded like a tractor. That engine was the 2.5-liter four-cylinder known as the Iron Duke. And for millions of Americans, it became the punchline to a joke that lasted decades. A joke told at car meets, a joke whispered in mechanics' garages, a joke that followed GM into the 1990s and beyond. But what almost nobody knows is this. The Iron Duke wasn't supposed to be exciting. It wasn't supposed to scream to 7,000 RPM. It wasn't supposed to win Daytona. It wasn't supposed to make you feel alive when you pressed the accelerator. It was built to survive. And in a decade when America's performance dreams were dying under emissions laws and fuel crises, survival was everything. Survival wasn't glamorous. It wasn't magazine cover worthy, but it was necessary. You think you know this engine? Not like this. The late 1970s were brutal for Detroit. Absolutely brutal. The Clean Air Act had strangled compression ratios. Insurance companies were charging insane premiums for V8 muscle cars, pricing young buyers completely out of the market. The 1973 oil embargo had changed the way Americans thought about gas. Lines at fuel stations stretched for blocks. Prices doubled, tripled. Suddenly, 15 miles per gallon wasn't cool. It was irresponsible. It was almost unpatriotic. The big three automakers were scrambling. They had spent decades perfecting big block V8s, building land yachts that guzzled premium fuel like water. Now, almost overnight, the rules had changed. The government wanted cleaner air. Consumers wanted cheaper fuel bills, and the Japanese were already knocking at the door with efficient little four-cylinders that actually worked. General Motors needed an engine that could power millions of compact cars. Something cheap, durable, efficient. Something that could meet tightening emission standards without exotic engineering or expensive materials. Something that assembly line workers could build quickly and parts suppliers could support for decades. The result was the Iron Duke, officially known as the 2.5-liter Pontiac four-cylinder. It displaced 151 cubic inches, a modest number, almost apologetic compared to the 454s and 455s that had ruled just years before. With a bore of 4.0 inches and a stroke of 3.0 inches, it was almost perfectly square. That geometry wasn't about high revs. It wasn't about screaming toward redline like an Italian exotic. It was about balance between torque and longevity. It was about decades of reliable service in everyday hands. Compression ratios hovered around 8.25.1 in early smog-era versions, low enough to run on regular unleaded without detonation. Safe, conservative, almost boring by design, but boring kept engines running. Boring kept warranty claims low. Boring kept accountants happy. Horsepower, just 87 to 92 in early carbureted trims. Torque sat around 132 lb-ft. Those numbers sound pathetic today. Even back then, they weren't impressive. Your neighbor's Honda Accord made similar power. European compacts were doing more with less displacement. Critics sharpened their pencils, but there was a reason for those numbers. A very deliberate reason. The block was cast iron. The head was cast iron. The crankshaft was thick, heavy, and built to take abuse that would destroy lighter designs. The main journals were massive for a four-cylinder, 3 main bearings, each one overbuilt for the loads it would actually see. This wasn't a delicate European twin-cam screamer built for weekend canyon runs. It was industrial. It was agricultural in its philosophy. It was American stubbornness cast in metal. Mechanics used to joke that you could run it without oil for 5 minutes and it would still get you home. That wasn't entirely true, but it wasn't entirely wrong either. Stories circulated in garages about Dukes that survived college students who never checked their dipstick, about delivery trucks that ran 50,000 miles overdue for oil changes, about engines that should have been dead 3 times over, still idling at stoplights. The simplicity was almost offensive to engineers who valued sophistication. 2 valves per cylinder, pushrod actuation, a single carburetor feeding all 4 holes. Nothing fancy, nothing delicate, nothing that couldn't be fixed with basic hand tools and a Saturday afternoon. And then came the first big moment that changed everything. In 1982, GM launched the Pontiac Fiero, mid-engine, 2 seats, wedge styling straight out of a sci-fi movie. The proportions were exotic. The stance was aggressive. The marketing promised something special. People expected a baby Ferrari. They expected America's answer to the Fiat X19. They expected their hearts to race. Instead, under the rear deck lid sat the Iron Duke, all 92 horsepower of it. 0 to 60 took around 11 seconds, sometimes longer if the air conditioning was running. The quarter mile was in the high 18-second range at roughly 75 mph. For something that looked like it belonged at Le Mans, that was a gut punch, a betrayal. A cruel joke from a company that seemed to be laughing at its own customers. Drivers were confused. Reviewers were brutal. One magazine called it a sports car powered by lawn equipment. Another suggested that the engine belonged in a golf cart, not a mid-engine coupe. Letters to automotive editors demanded answers. How could GM do this? How could they build something so beautiful and make it so slow? But here's the part most people miss. The part that changes everything if you're willing to listen. The Iron Duke wasn't designed for the Fiero. It was designed for cars like the Chevrolet Citation, the Pontiac Phoenix, the Oldsmobile Omega, the Buick Skylark. Front-wheel drive commuters, appliances on wheels. In those cars, the Duke delivered around 25 to 30 miles per gallon on the highway. In 1980, when gas prices were climbing and paychecks weren't, that mattered more than 0-60 times. That mattered more than bragging rights at the local cruise night. The Fiero was supposed to get the V6 from the start. Internal documents later revealed that engineers knew the Iron Duke was underpowered for a sports car application, but cost-cutting won. Bean counters overruled engineers. The Duke went in because it was already paid for, already tooled, already flowing off assembly lines in huge numbers. Still, there was a problem, a growing problem. The engine's reputation began to collapse under the weight of expectation. Every disappointed Fiero owner told friends. Every magazine review warned buyers. The jokes spread faster than sales. And then the real nightmare started. Early Fieros experienced engine bay fires. Not many, statistically speaking, but enough to make headlines, enough to become legend. Oil leaks from the connecting rods, combined with poor ventilation in the mid-engine layout and aggressive driving by owners trying to extract speed that wasn't there, sometimes led to catastrophic failures. The 1984 model year was the worst. Rod bearings would spin if oil levels dropped even slightly. The engine only held about 4 quarts. A small amount for an engine working hard. Run it low, and at sustained high RPM, oil pressure dropped fast. Faster than drivers realized. Oil pressure dropped, bearings overheated, metal touched metal where it shouldn't. The crankshaft scored, connecting rods failed, and sometimes, in the worst cases, oil sprayed onto hot exhaust components just inches away in that tightly packaged engine bay. It wasn't that the Iron Duke was weak. It wasn't that the design was fundamentally flawed. It was that it was being used in a way it was never meant to be used. Sustained high RPM, sports car driving exposed limits that would never appear in a Citation puttering to the grocery store. The Duke was being asked to run at the edge of its envelope, constantly, by drivers who expected European sports car behavior. GM revised the design. Lawyers got involved. Engineers went back to the drawing board. Stronger connecting rods appeared. Improved oiling passages helped maintain pressure during hard cornering. Updated pistons better tolerated heat. By 1985, Horsepower in the Fiero rose to 98 thanks to throttle body fuel injection replacing the carburetor. Torque increased to about 135 lb-ft. Still not fast, still not what dreamers wanted, but more refined, more reliable, more honest about its capabilities. The truth is, the Iron Duke made its power low in the rev range. Peak torque came around 2,800 RPM. That made it feel stronger in city driving than the numbers suggested. Merging onto highways, pulling away from stoplights, the engine felt adequate, almost competent. But try to push it past 5,000 RPM and it sounded angry, unhappy. Vibrations increased. The valve train protested. Everything begged you to shift because it was never meant to live there. The engine was designed around 3,000 RPM cruising, around suburban commutes and highway droning, not autocross, not canyon carving. Meanwhile, in NASCAR's lower divisions and in IMSA endurance racing, something unexpected happened, something that would challenge every assumption about the Iron Duke. Teams started experimenting with the Duke. The question was simple but challenging. How do you make a grocery getter survive 24 hours of flat-out racing? You reinforce everything. You throw out the cost constraints. You engineer without compromise. The Superduty 4 was born from this effort. It was still based on the Iron Duke architecture, still 4.0-inch bore spacing, still pushrod, still carrying the basic DNA that powered Citations and Phoenixes. But the block was redesigned with thicker cylinder walls that could handle sustained high RPM without cracking. Reinforced main caps prevented crankwalk under racing loads. Displacements ranged from 2.5 to 3.0 liters depending on stroke and intended class regulations. Some versions ran 12.0.1 compression, with forged pistons replacing the stalkers, high-flow aluminum heads replacing the cast-iron anchors, roller camshafts with aggressive profiles, and carefully tuned intake and exhaust systems. They produced over 300 horsepower in race trim, from a 4-cylinder that originally made under 100. Triple the power. Same basic architecture. At the 1984 IMSA GTU races, Pontiac Fieros, powered by Superduty variants, became legitimate competitors. Not jokes, not also rans, competitors. Drivers like Doc Bundy pushed them hard through corners that would have destroyed stock engines, hour after hour, session after session, and these engines survived. They didn't just survive, they won. So what changed between the 92 horsepower commuter mill and the 300 horsepower race engine? The oiling system was improved dramatically. Dry sump setups with external reservoirs ensured constant lubrication under high G-forces that would have starved the stock wet sump system. Oil capacity increased, cooling improved, stronger crankshafts with better metallurgy handled 7,000 RPM without twisting or failing. Balanced rotating assemblies reduced the vibrations that plagued stock engines at high speeds. The same basic DNA, completely different execution, completely different expectations. And that's the irony that haunts this engine's legacy. The engine America loved to hate had racing potential buried inside it all along. The architecture wasn't the problem. The execution for mass market economics was the limitation. Given proper investment, proper engineering attention, the humble Iron Duke could scream with the best of them. Back in showrooms, though, most customers weren't buying Super Duty race cars. They weren't reading engineering journals about bore spacing and oiling systems. They were buying economy. They were buying transportation. They were buying what their budgets allowed. By the late 1980s, the Iron Duke evolved into the Tech 4. The name changed, but the bones remained. Fuel injection became standard across applications. Electronic controls replaced mechanical simplicity. Power climbed to around 110 horsepower in some configurations with optimized tuning and better breathing. Torque remained the star, often around 135 to 140 lb-ft, coming in low and staying usable through the practical rev range. In lightweight vehicles like the Chevrolet S10 pickup, it delivered decent utility. You weren't drag racing anyone. You weren't impressing dates, but you could haul mulch on weekends, commute daily through city traffic, tow light trailers, and rack up 200,000 miles with nothing more than regular oil changes and occasional tune-ups. Production numbers were staggering when finally tallied. Millions were built between 1977 and the early 1990s. Millions. It powered everything from the Chevrolet Celebrity to the Pontiac 6000 to Oldsmobile Cutlass Sierra to base model Camaros. Yes, even the Camaro, even that American icon. Imagine opening the hood of an American pony car, expecting V8 thunder, and seeing a four-cylinder with an iron head. That's how far performance had fallen in those dark years. That's how desperate times had become. But here's a question worth asking honestly. Was it really the engine's fault? Was the Iron Duke truly a failure? Or was it simply misunderstood? The Iron Duke wasn't pretending to be a high-revving Honda twin cam. It wasn't marketed as a precision German sport engine with perfect balance and exotic materials. It was designed around cost, durability, and emissions compliance. Three priorities that don't care about magazine reviews or stoplight races. The bore spacing allowed for thick cylinder walls that resisted cracking and wear. Overbores were limited, usually around 0.030 inches safely, because the castings were optimized for strength and longevity, not racing modifications. The heavy reciprocating assembly with its chunky rods and robust crankshaft kept rev limits around 5,000 to 5,500 RPM in stock form. But that same mass contributed to longevity that lighter engines couldn't match. Main bearings rarely failed under normal use. Timing gears, not chains that stretched over time, reduced maintenance requirements and kept valve timing consistent for hundreds of thousands of miles. It was simple, brutally simple. Almost offensively simple to enthusiasts who worshipped complexity. And that simplicity kept it alive long after more sophisticated engines had been scrapped. Still, by the early 1990s, the world had changed again. Changed dramatically. Japanese automakers were building smooth, overhead cam four-cylinders that revved higher, made more power per liter, and sounded better doing it. Honda's VTEC technology was making headlines. Toyota's twin-cam engines were earning respect. Multi-valve heads became common, improving breathing and efficiency simultaneously. Aluminum blocks reduced weight, improving handling and fuel economy. Variable intake systems optimized power across the rev range. The Iron Duke, with its cast-iron everything and pushrod valve train and two-valve head, felt ancient. It felt like a relic from a different era. Because it was. GM began phasing it out quietly. New four-cylinder designs with overhead cams and aluminum construction replaced it in model after model. By 1993, production ended completely. The tooling was retired. The engineering files were archived. A chapter closed quietly, without ceremony. No fanfare. No tribute videos. No commemorative editions. Just an engine that had powered a generation of American transportation. Gone. Today, mention the Iron Duke online and you'll see the jokes immediately. Memes about slow Fieros flood comment sections. Social media posts mock boat anchor engines. YouTubers make fun of the wheezing four-cylinder that couldn't get out of its own way. But talk to mechanics who worked on them for years. Visit independent shops where old-timers remember the 1980s. You'll hear something different. You'll hear stories of Dukes running 250,000 miles with nothing but basic maintenance. Of engines that survived abuse, neglect, and ignorance that would have grenaded more sophisticated designs in months. Of cheap parts available at any auto store. Of easy repairs that didn't require special tools or dealer visits. Of blocks that refused to crack no matter how hot they got. You'll hear respect hidden beneath the laughter. That's the hidden truth about the Iron Duke. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't fast. It didn't make your heart race or your palms sweat. But it did exactly what America needed at a very specific moment in history when needs trumped wants. It bridged the gap between the muscle car collapse of the 1970s and the performance rebirth of the 1990s. It kept factories running when they might have closed. It kept compact cars affordable when families needed cheap transportation. It met emissions targets when V8s were gasping for air and facing extinction. And in race trim, when engineers unleashed its hidden potential with proper investment, it proved the architecture wasn't the joke people thought it was. So why do people still hate it after all these years? Because it showed up in places it didn't belong. Because marketing wrote checks the engine couldn't cash. A mid-engine sports car with 92 horsepower will always disappoint dreamers who believed the styling. A Camaro with a 4-cylinder badge will always bruise egos that expected V8 rumble. The Iron Duke became a symbol of broken promises, even though it never made those promises itself. But judged on its actual mission, durability, efficiency, mass production, compliance, cost control, it succeeded brilliantly. In a way, the Iron Duke represents an uncomfortable truth about automotive history that enthusiasts don't like admitting. Not every engine is built to thrill you. Not every engine exists for weekend drives or track days. Some are built to carry you through hard times. Some are built to keep families moving when money is tight. Some are built for survival, not glory. And it did that for millions of Americans who never thought twice about what was under their hoods. It may have sounded like a tractor at idle. It may have been mocked at stoplights by faster cars. It may have disappointed every teenager who expected Fiero performance to match Fiero looks, but it kept turning. Day after day, month after month, year after year, decade after decade. That's not exciting. That won't sell magazines or generate clicks. But it's impressive in a way that matters when you're 40 miles from home and the engine is all that stands between you and a long walk. The Iron Duke 2.5-liter wasn't a hero in the traditional sense. It didn't dominate Daytona. It didn't rewrite quarter-mile records. It never graced bedroom posters or inspired childhood dreams. What it did was survive an era that nearly killed American performance altogether. It kept the lights on at Pontiac plants. It gave millions of buyers honest transportation. It asked nothing except basic care and gave everything in return. All 151 cubic inches of cast iron stubbornness. If you enjoyed this deep dive into one of the most misunderstood engines in American history, let me know in the comments what you want to see next. Another forgotten 4-cylinder that deserves reconsideration? A legendary V8 with secrets still untold? Or a rivalry that changed everything about how we think about cars? Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next story. Because sometimes, the engines we laugh at the hardest are the ones that quietly held the industry together when nothing else could.